And we're back, and it is COMP392 in the winter of 2016, and this winter is not letting it go, man. It's not letting it go. This week, we're gonna have more winter, but hopefully it's gonna be more fun for you guys. So I took a look at the stuff that came in on some things that came in on Friday. You know, for what I saw, it's not bad. It's not, you know, pretty good. There's some finishing touches. We do this Friday. I want to talk about some strategies on how to get some of that stuff done. And I think last time we left off, we installed the CreateJS library to help us with Score. We never did anything with it, if I'm not wrong, right? So let's start off where we left off last time. So we were working with a project called COMP392 Lesson 9. I'm just going to duplicate this, and we're going to make this COMP392 Lesson 10. And I'm just going to put it up on, please bear with me while I put everything up for you, so that way you don't have to download a dud. So again, I want to use, my thoughts are, I want to use while I'm building this, I'll talk. I want to use the CreateJS library for scoring and sound, because it makes it a little easier. It's still a web API, it's a 2D API, but it's okay, we can still use it. We can also use it for preloading assets, which we can do as well. So all those kind of things are cool. Open a terminal. But we can still use our WebGL API, which is 3JS for now, and PhysiJS, the physics engine, to generate everything else we need. All right, so let's do that. So I'm going to say rm minus rf dot git init git add dot. Oh yeah, lots of stuff here. Git commit minus m, and I'll say initial commit. And I'll rename everything after I do this. So instead of renaming and all that stuff, I'll just rename as I go. And we'll get another GitHub repository going on so you guys can follow along. And what we'll do is we'll set up another one, COMP392, and it's lesson 10, which I will set up for you guys in short order. And I'll even, one thing I noticed, just for people who don't know, PhysiJS has a funny side effect. It has a bunch of files that prevent you to deploy things on Azure properly. So probably most of you figured that out by now. There is a way to fix it, and this version of the working files that I'm using has it fixed. So if you download my version, it will fix you. Wow, it's pretty big, 40 megs, 50 megs. Yeah. I'll talk about this for a second. So if you go to scripts under lib, there is 2 3JS versions. One of them is the newer one. The other one that's been installed by PhysiJS, right? Leave them as is. That's not your problem. The biggest problem is that inside PhysiJS, you have an examples folder, and inside the examples folder, you have a JS folder with an ammo.js, right? What it is what you don't want is anything else other than this. Okay, so you don't want additional folders. You don't want the extras folder or the demo folder or whatever. You want to get rid of that. Any demo folder that's inside of PhysiJS, this is where the problem lies. And anything that's in ammo.js, if you notice, ammo.js has builds, that's okay. It has bullets, that's okay too, that's bullet physics. Tests are good, but there might also be a demo folder that's inside ammo.js that comes with PhysiJS. Get rid of it, and then you won't have a problem deploying. Because what's happening is, on Azure, it doesn't understand which library to use, and that's what's causing an error. If you actually read the problems, and just to go back and to compare, and by the way, now our newer version should be up online on version 10, lesson 10 should be up on. But if I go up on previous versions, if I go back a couple of versions, so not last week, but the week before, so let's say 12 days ago, and if I go into scripts, and if I go to lib, and then I go into ammo.js, notice that I don't just have builds, bullet, and tests, but I also have an examples folder. Get rid of that folder. Right? If you get rid of this examples folder, you're golden, because in here you have a WebGL demo, and you know, this is one of the problems that we have. Okay, so that's one of them. And the other one is, so that's ammo.js. It's also in PhysiJS, there's an examples folder, and inside there we have models, images, CSS, and a bunch of other examples, you don't need any of that stuff. All you need is the JS files that are in here, right? So you can slim this down a lot. So, and I've done that. If you compare this version, if that was your starter version with the latest one I just put up, which is less than 10, it won't have all that extra information you get from Bower. When we did a Bower install of Fizzy.js, it installed extra information and it's not really compatible with Azure. So please get rid of that. That'll fix your problem.
Don't just get rid of that example.
Any of the examples, well, no, not any of them. Just match the one I have on my line, because you still need, if you look at the latest one I just put up under scripts, so there's 2 folders that are part of the Fizzy.js engine, all right? The 2 main folders are, if I look at Fizzy.js, right inside there, you need examples for the Fizzy.js because you need this stuff, tween and ammo.js and so on. You need those things. It accesses those things, right? And you also need ammo.js, right? But if you notice, I only have builds, bullet, and tests. I don't have anything else like other examples. Those are gone, right? So if you get rid of those things, you're good to go. So please use my latest one, the one I just put up there, as the one that will work on Azure, 100%. Okay, those are the issues that we encountered from last time, and I just wanted to let you know about it. So as we move into our final project, which I will give out, I've almost completed it. I'm going to give it out on the Wednesday when I see you guys next. I'm going to allow up to 3 people to work on it together, just letting you know ahead of time. So if you want to work with you and another 2 members, that's fine because it's a little bit bigger. It's going to be worth all together in little piece parts, about 30% of your final grade. But again, every week is going to be like 5%, 10% or something. It's not going to be like one big 30% evaluation. It will be smaller evaluations throughout the time. So it'll give you all a chance to kind of, produce something every week. For those people who are doing things on other classes, it'll be the same. I'll try and chunk it a little bit here, a little bit there every week. So it's not like a big, massive thing you have to get done at the end, especially since the 3 classes are very linked together. There's almost very similarities between the classes. Assets, if you're using, for example, I will allow assets to be shared. So if you're using something like, if you're working with Game Programming 1 and you're doing a 3D project and you want to use the same assets from that project on this one, and if you can make them work, all the power to you. Go ahead, right? If you're on the 2D side and you want to use some of those assets on COMP397 that you're going to use on Game Programming 1, I'm fine with that too, right? So asset sharing is no problem. And the code is very similar, from one kind of program to the other. So I don't mind if you're building the same games, but in different platforms. That I'm okay with, right? So don't kill yourself trying to build out, 3 different games if you're taking all 3, right? Okay. So I just started putting this up. Let's make some changes here. Notice that in the latest version of the library that I just put up, I have preload.js, sound.js, and tween.js, and so on. I want to create a scoreboard now for my game. Let's see what we've got so far. So I'm just going to kind of go on here and just run gulp and see what we've got so far, just to kind of go over the level of play. Now, even though it says less than that, we'll change this. So here's what we got so far. So if everything goes well, we have our little land, and we have our kind of, our guy here, and he can walk around, but there's no sound. And the other thing that we have a problem with this is there's no scoreboard, right? Here's a couple of things. Do I really need these controls up here? The answer is no. So I'm going to get rid of them, right? So in this version, again, we're just revamping our template. So I'm going to go into scripts, core, game.ts, and I'm going to skip down here until I see that that extra information we don't need, right? So if you look at the GUI controls, I'm going to get rid of them, right? I don't need them for this project, right? That was there. It's there for us to help test, right? But for now, there's really no need for them. Now, you got to be careful. If I remove those, then anything inside of my game loop, I got to make sure that I don't have anything that accesses those controls, right? Those other controls. The other thing is I don't need any other kind of methods, or like, for example, this add stats object is okay, but this add control function I don't need anymore, so I can probably get rid of that too. Just slimming down, because I'm kind of getting rid of that stuff. So that's one. I'm just cleaning this project up because we're gearing towards kind of our final game. And, anything that we don't need, it's a good time to purge, right? I could also clean up my index.html file because, for example, here, I have some stuff that I don't need, like the .GUI library. I could get rid of at this point because I don't need it anymore, right? I'm not using it, so I can get rid of this thing. Now you could leave it in for testing if you like. Me, I'm not even going to include it, right? And same thing with my anything else that I don't deem as part of my project, because it's going to increase the size of my project. Like example would be my control.js and my point.js. If I don't need a point.js anymore. These are just examples that we were using over the course of the semester. I don't want to use these things anymore, so these can go. Right, and that means that I need some cleaning up to do. Right, I've got to go into my files and into lesson 10, and on the operating system side, I'm just going to purge some of the stuff that's working. Now, when I do this mass purge, you might say, well, do you really need to do that now, Tom? Well, it's just housekeeping, right? We want to try and get rid of some of this stuff. The control class can go because we've been using it for testing. That's what it was really there for. Our game object, unless I'm using it, which I'm not right now, right? It's got to go, right? So this game object, notice that I have it here, game object, but inside my game.ts file, did I use game object at all? Like it was just an example of what I had put together. Am I going to use a game object in the future? Don't know, but I'm not going to use it right now. I'm going to get rid of it, right? So you see that I'm not using it anywhere else right now, so I can get rid of that. So we're going to back to the operating system and get rid of that stuff too. So game objects got to go. I'm just going to clean up here. Keyboard controls I need, mouse controls I need. My point I don't need, so we can get rid of this stuff. I'm lightening the load, right? And inside my other places I got to get rid of is inside my index.html. I'm just purging, right? So I'm going to get rid of this. My game object.js, that's gone. This stuff can all stay. Stats, easel, blah, blah. I still want to use stats because that gives me, how we're doing in terms of our performance. Inside another thing to purge would be inside my core.js. I have a reference.ts file that I can probably clean up a little bit. So I don't need these three actually, references. Those are the three things that I had added in there. I'm going to add my own. Trust me. There's going to be more I'm going to add in there. But for now, I'm purging, right? Okay, and I might as well update my index.html to say that it's lesson 10 because that's the new lesson. This is the time I'm doing all this stuff. Again, this is just project setup for today and for next day. Gulp, I'm going to still use. That's not going to change. Bower, it's going to be lesson 10. And this is going to say lesson 10, not lesson 8. I don't know. I guess I left that last time. I don't need .GUI. See how it says .GUI as dependencies for this project? I'm not going to need it, so I'm going to remove it from my my Bower dependencies, right? And if I really want to, I can go into my scripts. So I'm pretty heavy already, lib, and get rid of .GUI. So I'm going to go into scripts lib here and just completely purge it. So I don't need that. I want to try and loosen my load a little bit or lighten my load because at the end of the day, guys, we have a lot of stuff going on. And you know what? As we move forward, we've got to be very clear as to what the gist, what are we doing here, right? We can't just keep adding and adding and adding. It's going to be like right now, we're already at 80 gigs of file, or 80 megs of file, sorry. And it's for nothing, right? So it's just like a lot of examples. So I'm just going to get rid of some of the stuff we're using. And then that way it'll lighten the load in terms of everything else we're doing. Okay, so we're going to say updated project. So I've got all this stuff going on. tsconfig.json is correct. Notice that I put, source maps are true and so on. One thing I've also done in my VS Code on my task.json, see where it says show output as silent. I'm going to change that to always. Because I want to start getting some feedback in terms of errors from now on when I kind of do any kind of transpiling right in here inside my IDE. I've got a lot of little changes going on. I'm going to save all. I've got all these changes. I've got 64 changes, a bunch of different deletions, if you notice right here, and modifications. I'm going to make those changes, and I'll say updated project. I haven't tested any of this, by the way, but I will right now, and just hopefully there'll be no issues. And of course, the way to check that is to see that everything is working. Right? There's no problems running. And let's check that out by going up here and refreshing the scene. And if there's a problem, which there seems to be, I can always check to see what the problem is and see what the issue is. And if you notice, it says uncut reference data is not defined in game.js, right? What was that? I may have. Under mouse controls? No. Show me.
Not in the script.
Index. Mouse controls here, yeah. Oh, that's just silly. So that's really weird. I wonder how that happened. But that shouldn't be an issue because that would be. Well, no, because look, it says uncom reference error game.ts28. That GUI. That's where it's causing me my problem. So so again, something that I left over from last time, which is totally fine. Again, I'm purging, and when you do a mass purge like this, expect problems, right? Just the way it is. So dat.gui. And again, if you look at some of this stuff, the things I've been doing, all I'm doing is getting rid of stuff I don't need. So I don't need this. Quick controls. And GUI is also from dat.gui, so this is gone too. And now let's transpile. I'll do a manual transpile here just to make sure. It says module objects has no exported member control and point and game object, which is, if you notice, I had put that in there, right? So these are the things that I need to get rid of. So point's gone, and control is gone, and I think I got game object in there too. It's minor things. But these are just because I've purged, right? And I've chosen to do so now for whatever reason. All right, and where else? Game object. Half pointer lock, camera blocker, instructions, spotlight, ground geometry, ground texture clock. Mouse controls are good. Keyboard controls is grounded velocity previous time. Let me just check out up here. Oh, game object. This has got to go to game object. Okay, let's see if that is a problem. I will purge really quickly. I'm just doing it here so I can see there's a quick, so I can have a quick notion of what it is. On tsd.d.ts 4.1 under scripts objects control.ts tsd.d.ts. How did that get in there? Well, it doesn't matter. I will purge it anyway. There's dat.gui and tsd.d.ts here. I don't know, but that's fine. We can totally get rid of that. I don't need this, and I don't need this. These two things in tsd.d.ts, that shouldn't be there. No. Gulp, chalk, Q, source maps, and we'll do this one more time. And now we should have a working version. So check. Yes. Console. Assets, image, gravel, cobble, JPEG, gravel, cobble, normal, and then Scrabble, cobble, normal.jpg in assets, localhost assets. That's a problem. And where did I pick that up? That would be in game.ts. Oh, some of the problem also is that if you don't put this in the root of your project, we found that as well, you can get some issues with loading some of this stuff up. Where did I put that? Probably in my uploading. Yeah, cobble normal. Assets, images, gravel, cobble, normal. Did I not have that? Don't know why that's happening. That's just weird. Was that? Is it? That's a good reason. See, some of you are catching it. Okay, that's another 13 changes that I made, and just going to increase that. Yeah, we got the purge because lots of stuff going on. Project adjustment. Push. And let's see if that is any issues. No, it doesn't show it there. And no errors here anymore. Game test 185. That's on console event, on the player event. We're going to get rid of that. I don't want to show that anymore. That's too heavy. We're going to start getting rid of some of our console commands as well. Those are all just things. Okay, so at this point, I think I've got a fairly stable place to start off from. I've just, again, if you look at the latest version up online, it's now functioning. Okay, so what I want to do, so far we've been using WebGL for everything. And what I want to start doing is using some basic things for our scoreboard. In order for us to do that, I talked about using another set of libraries called create.js. So if I go to create.js .com, you'll see that there's a few libraries here that are quite useful for us. One is easel.js that I'm going to use to cover our canvas. For those people who are doing COMP397 with me, this is very familiar to you. You've been using this already. But for everyone else, I'm going to give you a quick crash course on how to do this. In Sound.js, we're going to use Sound.js to make our sounds, and we're preloading everything that we're going to load. Right? So those are the three things we're going to make, we're going to use. And the first thing I'd like to try and do is add some sounds into our game. All right. So it's how do we add sounds? So when a person lands, they hear that doop, like we get from, for example, from our Unity. Right. So how do we get that? So one of the things we've been doing, if you look at all the way on the bottom of our code, right now what happens is we load our init function right from the get-go, right? And what I want to do instead of loading an init function is load a preloader, right? So preloading is what I'm going to add in there, but in order for me to have a preloader work, I have to create a function that comes before the init function, before this function here. So let's make some room. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this function something called preload, okay? Now, 3JS has its own loader that we can use as well for what its functions are doing. But for sounds and other things, we're going to use this other preloader. Images, other things we're going to use for sound and graphics. Okay, so here's our preload. It's going to return void just to fix this up and go real TypeScript on everybody. Same thing with our init. We didn't kind of put that in, but it returns void as well. Let's just format all of our code just to kind of come into play with that. So what does preload look like? If I go to preload.js, if you look at each of these has docs. If I go to docs under create.js, and if I go to preload.js, you'll notice here that we have in our docs section, right? It gives us an example of what the preloader will look like. Here's what it looks like right now. So we need to create a queue, a load queue, if you will, that I'm going to call assets. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a manifest of stuff that I'm going to load up, right? As I created. So for you, because this is not the course we're taking, it's kind of a little out of scope for what we're doing. I'm just going to give you the code instead of you having to figure out the code, right? It's not what you need to do. So it's a create.js load queue that I'm going to put in. So first of all, I need to create that structure. I'm going to call this thing, I'm going to give a global variable called assets, which is going to be of type create.js.loadQueue. Okay, that's the first thing I'm going to create. So this is your assets. I'm going to hold all of my 2D assets and sounds in this load queue. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, 2. Once I've done that, I've created an assets. I'm going to do something like this. Assets is equal to a new create.js load queue. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do. Now, if you notice, the documentation is right there. First thing is we create a new load queue. Second thing is we install a plugin for sound. Now, we talked about this before. Not every TypeScript definition library is accurate. This is one of the ones that is not accurate as well, after understanding. So if I say assets, right, and if I look at what I'm doing, I'm installing a plugin, install plugin, and there's different plugins you can add in. I want to install the create.js.sound plugin, so sound. And if you notice, I'm going to get an error. But here's create.js sound, and if you look over here, here's the example. You know it's going to work, right? So you know this is wrong. So where's the error? It's not in create.js sound, it's under preload. And if I look at my, this is the quick fix. If I go to my typings, and if I go to preload.js, so preload.js.d.ts file, and if I search for install plugin, right, notice that it's requiring a plugin that's taking or a function that returns any, right? Well, create.js is not a function that returns any, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of accept any. That's the kind of quick and dirty that we're going to take, any. And that's on line 161 of preload.js.d.ts. Luckily, we're being recorded, so we can always go back and fix this problem. Okay, so that's the first change we have to make. And if you notice, once I've done that, then our install plugin create.js framework works. And we need this install plugin in order for us to get MP3 sound and wave sound and everything else working on our with our preloading. That's number one. Two, we're going to say that when we're finished loading, then we're going to call the init function. So we're going to create an event listener. So we're going to do something like this: assets.on. On is the create.js way of a quick way of doing add event listener. We're going to say on complete. So when it's complete, I want to call init. So as soon as my my assets are finished loading, we're going to call the init function, which is what we've been doing this whole time. Okay, that's the first thing. Next, we're going to load a manifest, but we don't have a manifest. We're going to create one in a second. But we're going to use this assets.loadManifest method to load something called manifest. So assets.loadManifest, right? And we're going to load a manifest file. We're just going to call it manifest. Or you can call it asset manifest, whatever you want to call it. In order for us to define that, we're going to define that up here as manifest, right? Is an array, is equal to an array, right, of, you guys can see? Manifest, here it is, I'll bring it up here. Manifest is an array of objects, and these objects have two properties, an ID and a source. It looks like this. If you notice, here's the ID, which is the friendly name we're going to use to access the asset, right? So here's our ID, and this is our source path, right? So we do this at the top in manifest, right? So let's check this out. So obviously my image is not the right image. I want to make sounds, and inside my audio, I have this thing called land.wave. Here's a land.wave in the manifest. Let's just call this land, lowercase l. And now here's the path to the assets. We have to define that too. So we're going to go up one, because we're inside our core. We're in this level, in the scripts level. We're going to go up two, right? We're now at the main root level, then down into assets, right? Just defining the path for you so you can see this. Down into assets, down into audio, right? And then what the thing is called, which is land, capital L, dot wave. That's our first asset. Okay, so now that we've got this asset, we've got our manifest. It's a very short manifest right now, but we're going to add to it, right? And we've preloaded everything here, and we have this event listener on complete. By the way, we can also pass in a reference to this. That's one thing that on complete allows us to do, this on method of doing an add event listener that's built into create.js. So we can pass in a reference to or this context from preload onwards. Okay, this is cool. We want to load preload now, not init, which means down at the bottom, we have to make that change to our windows.onload method. So if you go to windows.onload, down here, change this to preload. Right, there we go. Okay, I'm saving everything, which means that if everything goes well, we'll have access to that stuff. I'm going to go way up to the top again for this. This is what it looks like. So I made those changes. And if I check my code, I'm finished transpiling. That's good. And if I go into my example, it looks like this. I can still see everything. And oh yeah, I flipped around. Hold on a second. That's a problem. As in, I didn't monitor everything as I moved. So, yay, okay, so here we are. And if I notice, I can move around left and right, up and down, and I'm pretty good. And notice I've got a bit of bump now because my bump map is working, not like before, right? So I can move along and stuff, but I still don't hear my sound when I land, right? Okay, cool. So how do I add sounds? Now that I have access to my sound and I have access to my create.js library, right? So here, what I've done is I've created an asset pool, if you will. That's what this is doing. An asset pool that I'm preloading. So before I even get to my init, I'm preloading my assets right here. That's what I'm doing with this line. Okay. Let me upload this to GitHub. So I'll say added. So you guys can watch it. So added preload function project. So you guys, if you guys didn't quite get that, you can see the changes that I put up on GitHub. Right. Again, I'm going to make a bunch of different little pushes today because I want you to see how I iterate, how I build the project slowly. Okay. So that's the first thing. So I've got my preload. I got to use my sound now. How do I do the sound? Well, where do I do it? I'm going to do it on collision, right? Now remember, we have a collision check right here online in my project, right? It's when I land on the ground. So when the event name is ground, right, on line 196, I land, right? And it says console.log, player hit the ground. Let's make the sound go there. And let's try this out. So I'm going to do, here's how you make sound with create.js. It's very simple. You go create.js, .sound, .play, and then the name of the sound we have in our library, right, which is land, right? If it works, if we're good, then I should just be able to do one of these, and we're good to go. Let's see if this works, right? And if I go back to here and I refresh, let's try it out, right? So let's see how it sounds. Yeah, we're pretty good, right? So we get our sound right now. So as I land, I get my sound. If I jump and if I land, right? See? Nice, and the sound is coming, right? So that's good. So we got our sound going on. Okay, if that's true, right? That's pretty cool. I've got my sound going. That is the first key, guys. If I can do my sound, I'm golden, man. That means my preloader's working, and I'm able to use my wave sounds, MP3 sounds, Ogg Vorbis. You know, pretty much it supports a lot of platforms, right? A lot of different kind of sounds, and it's built in. Okay, this is cool. So we've got this piece going. You can see how the collision is working. I need a scoreboard now, and in order for me to do that, so when would I do it? I mean, obviously, here's our preload. If I'm going to add any kind of graphics, 2D graphics, I'm going to define them here in my manifest. But I also want to do another function here that I'm going to call in my init function, right? Which I'm going to define here as a separate function called setup canvas. Okay, let's do this together. So I'm going to call a new function called setup canvas, right? Which is going to return void. And remember, I'm going to be using an HTML5 canvas element to store my, that's the way I'm doing it. You guys can do it different ways, by the way. My recommendation is you kind of put together a little canvas, and that little canvas is going to be keeping track of everything else. All right. Let's you add some more things to the global namespace for a second. All right. And again, you can sort these variables out in different ways. I'm going to define a canvas as an HTML element, right? Which we're gonna kind of hook into, right? And I also need something else. I need a stage, which is of type create.js, right? Got capital S stage, no, not shadow, stage. All right, so those two elements I need. This is setting up all my create.js stuff. And you know what? Just to separate it out so you can see it, here are my create.js related variables. One day we may want to separate all this stuff out a little bit and make it different, right? Okay, cool. So in order for us to set up a canvas, we need a canvas on the screen. So if I go back, just minify these things, collapse some of these things I don't need, right? If I go back to my index.html, right, notice that all I have is something called a blocker div, right, with an instructions div and a span of play, right? That's what it's done. And then what's happening is we use some little quick CSS in order for us to create this, you know, overlay, right? Well, I'm going to create another div, right? And inside the div, I'm going to add in the canvas element with an ID of canvas, shorthand, guys, shorthand, right? And when I press tab, right, here's my ID of canvas, right? And this is where my scoreboard is going to live, okay? Notice that I'm not putting in a width or a height attribute. I'm going to define the width and height in code, right? Because I wanted to resize as my screen resizes, so I can support many screen sizes. So that's the first thing. I need to add this canvas element into the game. All right, go back to game.ts. Here it is. Now, if I notice that I'm going to set up my canvas, and the way to do that, of course, is to make a reference to it. So I'm going to say canvas, this is the variable, is equal to, and here we go, old JavaScript, document, someone's trying out their sounds, document.getElement by ID, and we're going to make a reference to that with canvas. And what is this doing? It's actually creating a binding between our canvas local variable with the canvas element that's in our HTML document. Guys, whether you do games or whether you're creating an advertisement or something else, and if you want to use a canvas element, this is the way we bind. That's the common way we bind everything. By the way, if you want to use jQuery instead of regular JavaScript, in this case, you could. Don't see why, though. It's just extra room, extra horsepower for nothing. All right, let's get into the meat and bones of this thing. We have to make a lot of little changes over the next couple days. So we've added a reference to our canvas, and what I want to do now is I want to set the width and height attributes of the canvas initially, right? So we're going to get in this a little bit different than we do on COMP397. We don't normally do that. We usually put the width and height right inside of our index.html. Not in this case. We'll do something different here. So we'll say canvas, and we're going to use the set attribute JavaScript method, set attribute, and what the attribute we're setting is width initially, and we're going to set the width to config.screen.width, and we're going to convert this to string because it needs to be a string. Okay, that's the first one. So the width of the canvas is going to be set to the width of the screen. That's what this is doing. All right. So you can see that a little bit closer. So we're still setting up the canvas here, right? Again, this is where our scoreboard is going to live, okay? That's why I'm setting it up this way. Hot? Sorry, I'm trying to keep it warm. Be cold, but what can we do? All right, let's do the same second thing. Canvas.set attribute. Oh, set attribute. And this time we'll do height. We'll do something slightly different than last time. We'll do this. We'll say, in brackets, config.screen.height, right? So in brackets, take a look. And we'll multiply that by 0.1, so 10% of the screen height. See, that's what I'm doing. And we'll convert all that to string. Okay, a little bit slick little piece of code there. Let's convert everything to string. So all I'm saying is get the height of the width of the screen, make that the width of the canvas. For the height of the canvas, take 10% of the height of the whole screen. So depending on your platform, it might be different than mine, right? And make that the top 10% of the canvas. That's where I'm going to put my score, okay? So I'm just setting up my attributes so we can do that. What else? One more thing. I'm going to say canvas.style.background color, right? That's the one I want to change. Background color, just like CSS. This is just CSS we're changing, right? Is equal to 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So it's black instead of like the standard white of the canvas. Okay. So white color. All right, so that's the canvas, but we also want to set up our stage, and this is where we do that. We say stage, right, is equal to a new create.js.stage, capital S, right, and we're going to pass in a reference to our canvas. Okay, so our stage is just a container. It's a JavaScript container that we're going to be using inside of our canvas to draw stuff. And what we're going to be drawing is our heads-up display. Now, by the way, you can put, for those people who aren't familiar with Create.js, you can put images in there, text, bitmap text, whatever you want inside that canvas element, right? We're only making it like this big, right, at the top of our object, right? And guys, I'm giving you this. You can, this is not. I won't consider it cheating if you use my code, because this is not a Create.js course. This is just me giving you to another way of creating a scoreboard, very simple scoreboard for yourself that you can modify heavily, right? All right. So once you've got this piece, right? This is the first piece of our canvas. And what I want to do, just to make sure, is in our reset function, we have actually a reset function way down here that I've already put in play, right? Inside of our, we have a resize method, and we use on-window resize. So when we change sizes, we change our renderer size. And that's right here on line 279 now of my code, right? Underneath that, I want to add some additions, right? And this is something that you guys can consider changing and optimizing a little bit if you like. I'm just going to give you a quick and dirty version of what kind of works for me, right? And I want to make sure that it works for you. All right, so one thing I want to say is this. I want to say on resize, I want to change my canvas, right? And I want to start with canvas. And that's why I made it a global element here, because I want to start working with it, right? So canvas.style.width. There it is. Width is equal to 100%. What I'm saying is take up the width. Every time I resize, make sure my width is 100%. I'm giving it an initial width That's why I did that early stuff with setup canvas stuff. But I'm going to resize every time. All right. I'm also going to do a stage.update. A stage.update, which what stage.update does is it refreshes, redraws the canvas, the stage on the canvas. That's what it does. Hey, speaking of stage.update, I'm not going to provide my own game loop with its own ticker class like I normally do with COMP397 because I already have a game loop that I'm going to tap into, and that's up here, right? So if you notice, I have a game loop already, well, maybe down here, that I already use, right? So there's no point me creating a second game loop just for CreateJS. So here where it says check controls, I'm going to check controls, and before I request animation frame, I'm going to do a stage.update. So every frame, from a fizzy.js perspective or 3JS perspective, this is where I'm going to update my stage. I'm not going to update my stage anywhere separately. It's an important consideration because we're already doing request animation frame, and I could certainly set up my own ticker class that updates every frame, but I've already got that structure. I want to tap into it as opposed to make it again, right? So that's the one piece I'm going to do. Okay, cool. So let's test out what I got. Nope, I have it both places. Because on refresh, I want to have that in there, right? And I also want to do it here as an extra time. Okay, so let's check this out and see if it happens. So notice I have my transpilation work fine. And for me, I've got this big swath of area here that should be your stuff. But hey, what's going on? How come this shows this, right, 100%, but I don't see black? Well, because if you remember that up in the top there, I created my setup canvas. Here's my setup canvas up here, and I styled it and everything else, but I never called it. I should call it before I do anything else. So here's my blocker, my instructions, my hat. Before I even check for pointer lock, I'm going to call my canvas because that's pretty much right away at the same place. So here I'm going to do something like here. I'm going to call it setup canvas, setup CreateJS canvas and stage. I'm doing here, and I'm going to say do the setup canvas function right here. Setup canvas. I'm going to call for the first time. There it is. Okay, now I'm going to save. When I do that, I save my stuff, I can see that I'm back to normal, and I've got this little space here. Take a look, which is like a little heads-up display where all my stuff is going to go. And the great thing is, if I resize it, so if I resize my stage, it resizes the size of my stage depending on how big my screen is. This is good, so it's responsive, right? So it'll work across any device. Okay, right here. This is the stage right here. This is where I'm going to put my controls. Now I still do have my FPS stats over here, and this is the FPS stats for my fizzy.js stuff. This stuff here. It's not the stats that are measured here inside my CreateJS stuff. Okay, although it's all in everything in packs. I'm using both WebGL and Canvas to do what I'm going to do. All right. Okay. That's one. Two, let's update that to GitHub, right? Because I've got some changes, right? I've got all these different changes that I've added in. I'm going to upload this to Canvas, and I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to say to GitHub, I mean, added Canvas or responsive Canvas project, right? And this is for scoring only. Okay, and I'm going to upload that by pushing it to GitHub. Any questions around what I'm doing, right? So all I'm doing is creating a canvas. Think about a canvas as a dry erase board, right? And the dry erase board is just pixels. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to populate that dry erase board with my score, and it's not going to be affected by any kind of HTML element. And why am I using a canvas instead of regular HTML? Because it's not just text I can put in there. I can put graphics. I can decorate my canvas so it looks really cool. In fact, if I'm really careful, I can make my canvas take up the whole screen, right, if I really want to. Or I can have two canvases, one at the top and one at the bottom, right, with my screen in the middle. If you want to, you can have as many as you want, and you can upload those different things and create almost like a heads-up display for your game. Okay, so we've got these two pieces, but I can't set up a score unless I have a couple things. I need a variable to make a reference to a score label, right, and I also need a variable, some variables for score values, right? So one is the score label that's going to be shown in my canvas, and the other one is a variable that's going to be keeping track, a number variable that's going to be keeping track of my of my score. And the same thing for lives label. And then I have to also update my resize function. So when I resize everything, my labels resize as well, because I want those to resize. How do I do that? What am I talking about anyway? What was that? Well, actually, they're not HTML elements now. I'm going to go revert back to setting up my create.js elements. Right, so there's 4 more variables I'm going to make under the create.js related variables. Here's one of them. So var, let's start typing, right? So score label is of type create.js.text. Oops, text with a capital T. Text. And var lives label, these are just labels, is create.js.text. That's another one. Just making references. Now, those are just the labels, the label controls for your UI. Okay, that's what they are. I need to make a couple of more controls, by the way, right? And those 2 controls that I want to put in there, they're not controls, they're just variables to hold the value. So var, and now I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to say score value is of type number. So the number is going to hold the value of my score. And var lives value is going to hold the number of my lives. Okay, so those are just variables that I need to get things going for my scoreboard. Okay, cool. Here, my setup canvas, that's cool. I've got my setup canvas over here. And what I want to do is I want to set up my scoreboard. Well, guess what? That's just another function that I'm going to make. So function, set up scoreboard. Yep. I'm just separating it. I'm just separating it. You could make your functions the way I'm just separating it by function. So my preload is one thing. Set up canvas. All it does is canvas and stage. And my set up my scoreboard is going to set up my initialization for my scoreboard, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do the following, right? I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to say lives or score value. Sorry, let's start with score value. Score value. I'm going to start off at 0, right? So I'm not going to have my score. My score value is going to start off at 0, and my lives value, right, is going to start off as 5. I want to give myself 5 lives. Okay, there you go. So that's just initialization. So comments, initialize, score, and lives values. That's what that's doing. Okay, next. I want to set up my lives label and my score label. So let's do this. So I'll say lives label, right, is equal to a new create.js.text. That's what it is, object. And what it's looking for is the text that I'm going to send out, the font, the type of font that I'm going to use. I'm going to use Consolus just for now. My color, the color of the font, and that's it. Those are the 3 things it needs, right? So I'm going to say my text is going to be like, starting off, it's going to be lives, capital I-V-S, like this, with a space, plus I'm going to add in there the lives value, right? That's initially. Okay, the other thing I need in here, I'm just going to make a space, just so that way we can have more room, not because I need to do this, but I'm just going to kind of do one of these, just to space it out a little bit in different lines. The next thing I need is my my font. So I'm going to say 40 pixels Consolus. That's what I'm going to use there. And the next thing I need is the font color, which I'm going to say, I'm going to make it white because my background is black. So FF for now. Okay, there we go. So lives label, that's my text, that's my object for my lives label. I also need to position it in a particular place. Remember, I've been using relative positioning now, right? With percentages. Let's do the same thing. So I'll say lives label dot x, the x coordinate of my lives label is actually going to be equal to my config dot screen dot width, right, times 0.1. And that means that my lives label, by the way, all create.js display components are the focal point or registration mark is the top left corner of the component. So my text object, the top left corner, is going to be 10% from the left side of the width. So whatever the width is, so let's say for example it's 1,000, it's going to be 100 pixels in. That's where it's going to be, right, from the left. That's my X component, right? I'm going to do the same thing for my Y component. So live label.y is, again, it's going to be responsive, and I'm going to say something like config.screen.width again. And we're going to multiply this by 0.1 again, right? So 0.1. But the problem with that is it's going to be, actually, it's height. I'll be okay. That's why I have my notes. Height times 0.1. So that's where it's going to be. But I also say that 0.1 is roughly 10% of my height, but it's not really accurate. And I'll tell you why. I'll take my 0.1. That's typically what I would normally do to keep the aspect ratio the same. But then I'm going to multiply that by 0.3. So 30% of the 10% that I've got. Why? Because my whole row is 10%. So let's say my height, my screen height at this particular moment in time is 1,000, right? That means I got 100 pixels from my scoreboard. And I want to take 30% of that 100 pixels, and I'm going to move 30% down into that 100 pixels, which is 30 pixels down. That's what this is doing, right? So that's my lives label.y. Okay, it's just being kind of thing. And then I'm going to say stage.addChild. Hey, look what I'm doing. Stage.addChild instead of scene.add. Very similar. And then I'm going to say lives label. So I'm going to add my lives label in place. I'm going to do a console command for now, so we can test it. Console.log, and we'll say something like added lives label to stage. Okay, that's the first piece. This whole piece is the lives label. Add lives label. Yeah. That's what it is. But I'm demonstrating it by doing this. I'm saying the height, like we've defined up here, the height is 0.1% of my screen height, right? So that's, let's say if it was 1,000, it'd be 100, right? And here I'm saying take that, whatever that is now, right, and multiply it by 0.3, so 30% of that remaining space, right? That's what I'm doing. Just to make it clear for us, yes, it could be 0.03, but who cares? Same. It's only one-time calculation. Okay, let's do it again. So I'm going to do the same idea, right? But I'm going to do the same thing for my score label. So I'm going to say add score label, right? And just in there, we'll do the same thing. I'm just going to scroll up so you guys can see all this. It'll be the same. So let's do it one more time so you've seen it again. So score label is equal to a new create.js.text object. That's what it is. And it needs the same kind of idea, the same three things, right? It needs a text, so score, right? Plus my score value, right? That's the first thing it needs. So we'll put this piece down here. And then we also need the text. I'll use the same font. We can change this later. So I'll say something like this. But we can also make it a configuration. We can add this to our config file. So these are, I can put constants in here instead of like hard-coded values. So I'll say 40 pixels consoles. You could use also a web font if you want to, which we'll do later on as we make our game. And the last thing is the color, which is hashtag FFFFFF, which is white, right? So that's kind of our configuration, right? And now we have to do our X, Y, and everything else. Let's copy some of this stuff so we don't have to do this again, and then just change the name to score label. So score label instead of lives label. Okay, and it's going to be slightly different because it's going to be, instead of 0.1, I'm going to put it to the side. So we're going to make it 0.8. So 80% of the screen width, right? That's what we're going to do. So 80% of the screen width. And then for our height, it's going to be the same. So screen height, 0.1 times 0.3, right? And that's where it's going to be. So why am I using relative measurements? Because I'm creating a responsive viewport. So therefore, I want my score to be responsive as well. And I'm using percentages instead of true pixels. Otherwise, I'm going to have it. The only thing that I'm not using percentages for, which I probably could, is my pixel size for my font. But you'll see that it resizes as I change my canvas, right? So it's not a big deal. Okay, cool. This is part of the work. We're almost done. 4 more minutes, and I swear I'll have my score done, right? Okay, now let's, how do we add, what else we have to add? We have to change our resizing, right? Because when we resize, we have to change some of this and flow it back and forth, right? So we're gonna go back down to our Windows resize, and here where we have our canvas style for our width, we're gonna make some changes so that when we resize our screen, everything gets resized as well, because we have to recalculate, right, at that point. If we don't recalculate, then our canvas will stay the same size. We don't want this to happen. And what is it going to look like? Well, it's going to be like this. Under, just before we do our stage update, and between our canvas style width is 100 and our stage.update, let's add our references to our lives label. And what am I going to add in? Well, I'm not going to retype it. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to go up here again, right? By the way, you could probably make a function to do something like this. But for me, I'm just going to copy paste. And you can see where you can make some changes up here. So here's this stuff here. See, look, these two things. I want to recalculate these things again because it'll be different when I resize. On resize, this is going to be different, right? So I'm going to copy this, go down to my resize function, right? Where I have that in, right? So here's my game loop, and my resize function has got to be somewhere down here. Where is it? I probably should split screen at this point. Yeah. Here it is. Here's my resize function. So I'm going to put those in there, right? Let's just format the text. So this is for my labels. Because my labels, I want them to resize. As my screen resizes, I want to recalculate. That's all I'm doing here. And then update my stage, right? Otherwise, it won't be truly responsive. It'll be some weird kind of half measure, right? We don't want to do that. So here's my score. Yes? No. No. It just resizes everything. I can rejig it on the fly. You'll see. Right, so I go back here. So all I'm doing here in my resize function is I'm just calling these things again. So theoretically, what I could do is make this into a method. I could extract these 4 lines into a method, and then I would save myself another call, right, just to optimize. I'm not going to do that right now because there's no time. All right, so once I've got these changes going on, let's see what it looks like now. So I'm going to go back to my Chrome. And if everything went well, then I should have all this in there, right? So where's my, how come it's not showing up, right? So let's take a look and see what I've got going on, because this is important. I mean, I've added it to the stage, right? But let's see if I've got any errors, and I do. I've got an uncaught type error, cannot set property X of undefined in one of my methods, and this is what kills it all, eh? 321. Let's take a look. So live label.x is config.screen.width.-0.1. So how come in my on resize function, lives label.x isn't happening? How come? Lives label.x is not defined here. Well, because we haven't called it, right? Again, going back to the top, remember we've created this monster function here, this setup scoreboard, but we never called it. It's got to be called after setup canvas. So let's set up our scoreboard here. So set up scoreboard, and then set up scoreboard. That's why I broke it out, Josh, right? Because what I'm doing is it's so much in one function. I want to be able to break it up so that my init function reads kind of like makes sense. And I want to kind of keep breaking these out until I chunk my my functions a little bit more. Eventually, what I could do is I could separate these out into separate files if I wanted to. Okay, but I'm not going to do that. All right, so cool, I've done this. Let's check my content to make sure it works now. We'll go back into here. And now I have it, I'm good, but I got a bit of a problem. What's my problem? My lives label is good, it works. But the problem is that I need space for my lives label to work. And maybe I was a little bit aggressive with 0.1, right? Or maybe the size of my lives label, right? On a higher resolution, it would work nice, right? I don't have a high resolution here. I have a low resolution. So what I need to do is adjust it for this. But it's there. Look, lives 5, score 0, right? So it's kind of there. We're almost there. I need to adjust it a little bit more. So maybe 0.1, not enough. Maybe I need to add 0.15, right? So 15%. Don't go too crazy and go 0.2. That's too much, right? So what does that mean? It means I have to make some micro adjustments in my test, right? With this low resolution, I've got to make some micro adjustments to here. So instead of it being the width is correct, the height is wrong. So 0.15 goes here, 0.15 goes here, and it has to go on the bottom as well when we resize, because if I don't do the bottom, then it won't resize properly. So this is where I'm going to make these micro adjustments here and here. Let's see if that works. So it's going to be a little bit bigger in screen height. Okay? And let's check this out. That's a little better. Now that's good, but I think I've come down too much. I think I got to come up a little bit, right? And this is just from a responsive perspective. So if I do one of these, take a look, see how it resizes with me. Lives and my score change sizes now. Depending on what size my screen is, it's going to be good, right? Responsive design. All right, so what I need to do is come up a little bit. Instead of 0.3 that I did, I'm going to go 0.25, all right? Or even maybe 0.2. Let's see if that works better. So again, I'm already here in my resize function. Let's go 0.25. So 25% of that remaining space of the 15% that I took from my entire screen height. And same thing with up here. I go all the way to the top. It's going to be 25. So I'm just going to come up a little bit so that way it's not as low. And let's see how that looks. Maybe even more. I think even 0.2. Sorry, guys. I know I'm being nitpicky, but you know what? It's important for me to get this right, because once we start doing our score, I want to fire and forget. I don't want to think about this anymore when I'm done, right? So I want to do it one time. When I'm done, I'm going to be okay, and I want to kind of save it and go. That's better. Look how nice and even that is now, right? So now when I resize, it seems to be the right size for my font. Yeah. Okay, cool. I've got my score working. My score is there. My scoreboard is there, but it's non-functional. I don't do anything with my score yet. And that's the next part. I can't do anything with my score until I have something to pick up, like a pickup or something to crash into, right? So we'll make one obstacle when we come back from break, and we'll go to Blender and export something from Blender, a coin, that we're going to actually import into Blender, from Blender into 3JS. And then you can use an object from Blender, custom-made object from Blender as a coin that I'm going to use as something that I can pick up. Okay, we'll do that after the break. Let's take 5.